Welcome to this edition of Market Mantra, in which we give you a complete update on the economic, business and stock market news of the day. Well, I am Nishit Kumar, and with me is my co-anchor in Hindi, Vishal Sharma. And to answer our listeners' queries, today we are joined in studio by our senior business analyst, Jayanta Das. Jayanta, welcome to our studios.
Thank you.
But first, the headlines. Domestic stocks fall more than 0.8%. Sensex closes near 59,600 points. Nifty settles near 17,800. The rupee weakens 42 paise against the US dollar. Global stocks witness losses and Brent crude prices rise above $107 per barrel.
घरेलू शेयर बाजारों में 0.8% से अधिक की गिरावट. सेंसेक्स 59,600 अंक के करीब हुआ बंद. निफ्टी 17,800 के नजदीक बंद हुआ. रुपया डॉलर के मुकाबले हुआ 42 पैसे कमजोर. वैश्विक शेयर बाजारों में दर्ज गिरावट और ब्रेंट कच्चे तेल की कीमतें बढ़कर $107 प्रति बैरल से ऊपर पहुंची. सबसे पहले बात शेयर बाजार की. सेंसेक्स और निफ्टी में आज लगातार दूसरे कारोबारी सत्र में गिरावट दर्ज हुई. वैश्विक शेयर बाजारों से कमजोर संकेतों के बीच दोनों सूचकांक नुकसान में रहे. सेंसेक्स 59,600 अंक के करीब और निफ्टी 17,800 के स्तर के आसपास बंद हुआ. बॉम्बे स्टॉक एक्सचेंज का सेंसेक्स 0.94% की मंदी से 566 अंक लुढ़ककर 59,610 पर बंद हुआ. नेशनल स्टॉक एक्सचेंज का निफ्टी भी 0.83% गिरकर 150 अंक नीचे 17,808 पर आ गया. व्यापक बाजार का प्रदर्शन सेंसेक्स से आज बेहतर रहा. बीएसई मिड कैप इंडेक्स में 0.41% की बढ़त रही और स्मॉल कैप इंडेक्स 0.38% लाभ में रहा.
The Sensex and the Nifty today witnessed losses for the second day in a row. Both the indices slipped amid weak cues from the global share markets. The Bombay Stock Exchange Sensex closed near 59,600 points, and the National Stock Exchange Nifty ended near 17,800 levels. The Sensex plunged 566 points or 0.94% to finish at 59,610. The Nifty also declined 150 points or 0.83% to settle at 17,808. And in the broader market, at the Bombay Stock Exchange, the mid-cap and the small-cap indices outperformed the Sensex. The mid-cap rose 0.41% and the small-cap index ended 0.38% up. In the Sensex pack, 10 companies logged gains while 20 declined. NTPC gained the most as it rose around 2.6%, followed by Tata Steel, which added 1.9%. Power Grid climbed 1.5%, while Bharti Airtel and Nestle India both gained 1.1% each. On the other hand, HDFC Bank declined 3.5%, while HDFC fell 3.2%. HCL Tech ended 2.1% down and Tech Mahindra slipped 2%. In the sectoral indices at the Bombay Stock Exchange, 9 indices climbed while 10 indices logged losses. Utilities index gained the most as it added 1.9%, followed by power, which rose 1.8%. Telecom index climbed 1.7% and metal rose 1.5%. On the other side, the IT index plunged 1.4% and finance tumbled 1.3%. Tech index declined 1.2% and BankX fell 1%. The overall breadth of the Bombay Stock Exchange trade was positive as shares of 2,142 companies gained while 1,277 fell. Shares of 93 companies remained unchanged. Well, Janto, over the past couple of sessions, the market has been playing truant, it seems, because post, let's say, this in this new financial year, the market had almost recovered very smartly from the lows of 10% correction, which we saw in the wake of, or in the backdrop, if we can say, the Ukraine and Russia crisis. So where do you see this going from here? And how do you see this?
Well, there are three aspects, I think, which we should focus when we are trying to do an overview of the market. The first aspect is obviously the geopolitical situation brought in completely by the Russia and Ukraine war which is happening in Europe. and of course the collateral damages in terms of economic indicators thereon. Not limited necessarily to Europe, but also various collateral other damages and all. That's the first part. The second part is overall in terms of how inflationary things are not only in India but also globally, with US, for example, facing its 40-year highest inflation levels. And based on it, obviously, the call is to see whether US would like to do a tough monetary policy situation starting from this month or maybe next month onwards, where it is being said that at least 25 basis point correction over 6 announcements is around 1.5% corrections is what they look forward to, or 150 basis points. The third part is what India's domestic scenario at this point of time is, if I have to specifically focus on Indian markets. And that is, on one hand, we have got juicy good collections, but on the other hand, the local inflation spiral is really on a very high level. RBI, I guess, sooner than later will take a call in terms of, hiking up interest rates to put a stop to this particular runaway spiral. If not stop, at least a controlling level sort of a thing.
Right.
But having said so, what we should also understand is, we have the monster of oil prices, playing truant not only in India, globally. I mean, in US, for example, prices doubled. States like California has $6 a gallon, where prices even 3 months ago was around $2, $2.50, even $3. So to that extent, prices have shot up. Most of the states in US are doing $4.50 a gallon at this point of time. So that's a jump from around $2 levels which they have been paying, say 2 months back. So it's not only playing true globally, but in India also, the multiplier effect, we all know on how the global oil prices and the domestic oil prices they are facing. Although there is some respite in terms of how the government is managing its oil reserves, its oil inflows, specifically the deals which have been done with Russia, where, the ruble-denominated oil prices and things like that. But on the whole, the issues are there, the concerns are there, the pressures are there. It's just not waved off. So all these factors put together, there is all the more chance of the markets, behaving the way they are at this point of time. And as I said earlier in the afternoon show, it will be swinging between a few days of how the global market reacts, and it will be swinging between, how the Indian domestic buyers trying to, perk up the markets if they see deep dips and they see there is an opportunity of buying, and we see those swings which we saw, of late also happening.
Yeah.
But on the whole, I believe industry is more or less on a good wicket in terms of the macroeconomic environment. We are past the worst in terms of COVID, so no one is speaking of a post-COVID recovery regime at this point of time. What we are speaking of is how we foresee the next 3 to 6 months here on. And all those discussions are based on or pivoted around how the global oil prices and the global crisis, which has been perpetrated in Ukraine, is happening. So those are the two important factors completely beyond our control. So what the government has to do is they have to do obviously more than an active response, a passive response in terms of a reaction, in terms of managing the policies based on what is happening globally. So there's nothing much in terms of policy-wise which the government can intervene at this point of time, apart from trying to see through this particular wave. But a lot of analysts are saying the worst is yet to come. So I hope that doesn't happen in the next 3 months or so. And this is also a time where we start predicting on the monsoons and how the monsoons will shape up. So typically, assuming there were no geopolitical tensions, April is the month where the Indian economy starts shaping up in terms of how the monsoons will come up from June onwards, and the market starts its early reactions to how the monsoons will shape up and things like that. But that's not happening obviously this time, because there are much more bigger issues and concerns which will be on the market.
Absolutely. But as you mentioned, the Russia-Ukraine crisis, it doesn't seem to have that much of an impact with the Indian markets, because it has very smartly rebounded from that 10% correction that we saw over the past maybe a month or so. So it's time that we can safely assume that the markets have kind of matured a bit, the Indian investors and all, and also with the kind of efflux that we saw, with the FPIs and PFIs, pulling out of the Indian markets, they have kind of a bit stabilized now, if not in the positive territory.
Well, Nishit, I have two views over here once again. The first view is any long-run war gradually gets discounted. And, obviously, the day when Russia attacked Ukraine first, those first 3 days of reaction, and a period of 6 to 7 weeks of violence happening there. Obviously, the effects on the market will be much more different in terms of how prolonged the market believes the war is going to continue. That's one part. The other part is what we are not realizing is the longer the war continues, there are a lot of unknown collateral damages which will not be limited to Ukraine and Russia. For example, JP Morgan chief came back, I think yesterday or this morning, saying that he is looking forward to $1 billion loss because of this particular Russian embargo happening. So that's a huge hit to take on the balance sheet. And obviously, JP Morgan is not the only bank which will be operating out of Russia. There will be tens or hundreds, which will be operating. And this is like a domino effect which we know. I mean, if big banks start taking hits, the smaller banks will be wiped off. I mean, so that's how the math works out.
True.
So having said so, while I'll not be overtly happy given the fact that markets have stopped to that extent deep discounting or even reacting to what is happening in Russia and Ukraine because things are settling down and it's coming to business as normal. But this is also not for the first time. I mean, forget Ukraine and Russia. When India was going through its worst second wave of COVID with so many deaths happening and no oxygen in hospitals and all in last May, markets were a runaway hit. I mean, as if there was nothing happening in the domestic markets. So markets in that sense tend to be insensitive sometimes. Call it, a deep discounted factor, or call it whatever, call it maturity of the market or call it whatever, but that's how markets are. I mean, that's where the word irrational exuberance are obviously associated and aligned with how markets behave.
जी, जयंता, आपने रूस यूक्रेन क्राइसिस की बात की और सप्लाई चेन पे भी असर पड़ा है प्रतिबंधों के चलते, और आपने इन्फ्लेशन की भी बात की. अब चौथी तिमाही के नतीजे आने वाले हैं, कंपनियों के आना शुरू हो जाएंगे. तो कहा यह जा रहा है कि हाई इनपुट कॉस्ट प्रेशर जो है और जो लंबे समय से कमोडिटी के जो हाई प्राइसेस चल रहे हैं, क्या इन सब का असर कारपोरेट अर्निंग्स पर, नतीजों पर पड़ सकता है?
ये बहुत अच्छा सवाल आपने किए. मैं मानता हूं जो सबसे ज्यादा दौर मुद्रास्फीति का खास करके कमोडिटी प्राइस में जो हुआ है वो फरवरी मार्च का दौरान हुआ है और काफी ज्यादा फर्क पड़ा मेटल्स का प्राइसेस में. हम सबको पता है. आई मीन, लोहे का दाम ऑलमोस्ट डबल हो गया. कोई भी चीज जहां पे लोहे यूज होता है वहां पे 15, 20, 25, 30% के करीब जंप हुए हैं. कहीं पे भी कोई भी लोहा मंडी में अब जाए आज का तारीख में, वो लोग घंटों के हिसाब से आजकल रेट बताते हैं. सुबह का रेट आप लेंगे तो शाम को पहले जो खरीदने जाएंगे तो उसमें अलग रेट हो सकता है. तो इस तरह का अनिश्चितता का सामने मैं मानता हूं कि ओवरऑल कॉर्पोरेट सेक्टर में, मैन्युफैक्चरिंग में जो लोग इन्वॉल्व है क्षेत्र में, ऑब्वियसली वहां पे बेशक एक हिट है और शायद नतीजे भी कुछ बताएंगे. लेकिन ओवरऑल इंडस्ट्री बेसिस में अगर हम बात करें, अगर बैंकिंग का बात करें, अगर सर्विस सेक्टर का बात करें, तो अच्छा रिजल्ट से उम्मीद किया जा सकता है. तो ओवरऑल अगर टोटल कॉर्पोरेट इंडिया के बारे में बात बोले तो आई थिंक इट विल शो अप अ गुड रिजल्ट आउट ऑफ ईयर. और ये एक शायद वजह है जहां पे मार्केट में जिस हद तक हम सोच रहे थे कि मार्केट टूट सकता है, मार्केट उस हद तक टूटे नहीं है. क्योंकि बैंकिंग क्षेत्र में देखिए, जैसे एचडीएफसी बैंक और एचडीएफसी का मर्जर के बारे में बात करें, इट्स बिजनेस एज यूजुअल टू दैट एक्सटेंट. और कंपनीज काफी सारे, वो तो खैर एक ही उदाहरण दिया मैंने, बट कंपनीज काफी सारे इस तरह का निर्णय ले रहे हैं जहां पे ओवरऑल बताया जा रहा है कि वी आर बैक टू बिजनेस. एक नॉर्मलसी का वातावरण के बारे में बात किया जा रहा है. उस तरह का अलार्मिंग सिचुएशन के बारे में बात बेशक इस वक्त नहीं हो रहा है, लेकिन इसका मतलब ये नहीं कि कंपनी का या कॉर्पोरेट क्षेत्र में कुछ अलग से चिंता विषय या कुछ कंसर्न्स है नहीं. है बहुत सारे, बिकॉज ऐसा तो हो नहीं सकता है कि अगर दुनिया भर में मुद्रास्फीति का एक अलग से स्थिति बना हुआ है वहां पे कॉर्पोरेट सेक्टर या कॉर्पोरेट ने विल बी अवे फ्रॉम दैट सिचुएशन. बेशक उनका भी कहीं ना कहीं, लेकिन सीधे जाके टॉप लाइन में या बॉटम लाइन में कितना हद तक असर होगा ये थोड़ा समय के साथ बताएंगे. लेकिन मैं मानता हूं अगर ये यूक्रेन और रशिया का वॉर थोड़ा और प्रोलॉन्ग होता है, कहेगा 4 हफ्ता 6 हफ्ता, यूक्रेन में तो कुछ बचा ही नहीं, लेकिन रशिया टेक ओवर भी नहीं कर पा रहे, तो तरह तरह का खबरें आ रहा है
जी.
अच्छा, अभी पिछले 2-3 दिन के दौरान आप देखेंगे कि ह्यूमन राइट्स वायलेशंस का बहुत सीवियर कंप्लेंट्स आ रहा है. किस तरह के लोगों को वहां पे मौत मिले, जरा बच्चे को मौत मिली. तो ये सारे खबरें धीरे धीरे ना मार्केट के ऊपर असर करते हैं. चाहे वॉर का जो अगर टेन्योर आप देखेंगे, लोग पहले एक झटका लगता है कि युद्ध शुरू हो गया, फिर जब युद्ध चलता है साल, 1.5 साल, 2 साल, तो युद्ध का अलग अलग विषय में अलग अलग छवि जब सामने आता है तो उसके ऊपर भी रिएक्शंस अलग तरीके से होता है. तो किसी को नहीं पता, जैसे हम कहते हैं इट्स अनकंट्रोल्ड मॉन्स्टर. किसी को नहीं पता इसमें सिर्फ रशिया का नुकसान नहीं, इसमें से यूक्रेन का नुकसान नहीं, पूरा देश में कहां पे किसको नुकसान हो रहा है, कौन व्यापारी को भारत के कोने में बैठा हुआ बेचारा क्या चीज का व्यापार कर रहा है उसको नुकसान हो सकता है, हमें किसी को नहीं पता. इस वजह से जब तक क्षेत्र विशेष में ना
जी। तो ऐसे में आरबीआई के सामने चुनौतियां कुछ अब लगता है ज्यादा हैं, क्योंकि जिस तरीके से महंगाई बढ़ रही है पूरी दुनिया भर में, तो आपको लगता है कि बढ़ती महंगाई को पीछे रख के आरबीआई आर्थिक वृद्धि को आगे बढ़ाने का जोखिम लेगा?
देखिए, कहना थोड़ा मुश्किल है, बिकॉज वेट एंड वॉच पॉलिसी तो लगातार आरबीआई का क्षेत्र से भी हम बहुत लगातार सुनते आ रहे हैं, जहां पे कॉशियस ऑप्टिमिज्म वगैरह वगैरह जो भी फ्रेज यूज करे। लेकिन ओवरऑल मैं मानता हूं कि ये निर्णय इट इज ड्यू ऑलमोस्ट 4 से 8 हफ्ता हो गए, जहां पे ब्याज दर के ऊपर एक वृद्धि का जो निर्णय है। अब ये देखना पड़ेगा कि आरबीआई कितना जल्दी वो ड्यू लेके, क्योंकि मुद्रास्फीति का ऐसा दौर है, अगर ज्यादा इसको आप बढ़ने दे तो बाद में छोटे मोटे ब्याज दर में कोई फर्क नहीं आएगा, तो उसमें असर नहीं होने वाला है। तो देश उसका सामना कितना कर पाएंगे एक झटका से, वो भी हमें समझने की जरूरत है।
We'll continue with this discussion, but it's time now for a quick commercial break. Stay tuned. We have lots coming up on the other side.
उपभोक्ताओं तक पहुंचने का सुलभ और सस्ता माध्यम है आकाशवाणी।
आकाशवाणी के विभिन्न केंद्रों से कीजिए अपने उत्पादों और सेवाओं का प्रचार विज्ञापनों के माध्यम से।
लोकल और राष्ट्रीय स्तर पर कीजिए अपने बिजनेस का विस्तार, क्योंकि आकाशवाणी में विज्ञापन बुकिंग हुई बहुत ही आसान।
अब घर, दफ्तर या दुकान पर बैठे बैठे आप कर सकते हैं विज्ञापनों की बुकिंग।
डायल कीजिए 870-001-4242।
नंबर एक बार फिर नोट करें, 870-001-4242।
Welcome back to the show, Market Mantra. Today we are joined in our studios by financial expert Jayanta Das. Jayanta, before going in the break, we were talking of inflation and the RBI response to it. Well, we all know that the Reserve Bank mandated, or rather that structured inflation level of 4%. We are well beyond that, right?
Exactly.
We are not in a very comfortable territory, if we may say so. So with I think on the 8th of this month, day after tomorrow, we have this MPC meeting. So do you think that it will be the MPC meeting outcome will be more kind of influenced by the domestic factors rather than being influenced by the Fed and all? Because Fed, as we have been seen, it has been making a lot of noise that it's overdue now, because inflationary pressures, as you said, as you mentioned in the program earlier, it's almost at a 40-year high in the US, and even we are not in a very comfortable situation right now. So do you see the rates kind of going up, the RBI kind of loosening, as in with that accommodative stance more?
Well, as an MPC member, I think they have to focus on the fact that it's a call. The sooner they make, the better it is, because I believe it's better to have a truncated rise in the rate of interest rather than a hefty rise at one go, because the shock to the economy would be in a much more sober manner. And of course, it's the call of the MPC, but I would like to see some rate hike at least to check on the spiraling inflation, even if it's a growth versus the interest rate decision, which always comes up, that whether I would like to wait for a bit more and then see the growth happening. I think the inflation spiral, I mean the pressure on oil prices and the domestic oil prices are going to remain there, and a wait and watch policy would not be a perfectly prudent manner at this point of time. So go for that little hike, I guess, at this point of time, and then obviously you can do a wait and watch, but then one doesn't know how the economy would react, because the pressure of oil prices, inflation, and all together, it's not exactly a very happy scenario to take a call in this. But that's what MPC is completely equipped and skilled to do. So that's what I look forward.
जी। और अब नजर डालते हैं घरेलू मुद्रा के प्रदर्शन पर। अंतरबैंक विदेशी मुद्रा बाजार में रुपया आज $1 की तुलना में 42 पैसे कमजोर होकर 75 रुपए 76 पैसे के स्तर पर बंद हुआ। जयंता, रुपए में डॉलर के मुकाबले 42 पैसे की कमजोरी और लगभग 76 रुपए के स्तर पर पहुंच रहा है, कैसे देखते हैं आप इसे?
देखिए, आई मीन ऑब्वियसली जो स्थिति बने हुए रुपये का ऊपर ये प्रेशर बने रहेंगे, और मैं मानता हूं कि 77 तक भी शायद इस वक्त अगर और भी कच्चे तेल की कीमतों के ऊपर और भी रेट का दर का फर्क हो तो इसमें थोड़ा बहुत फर्क हो सकता है। और ये हमें समझना चाहिए कि काफी सारी चीजों के ऊपर निर्भर करता है, और ये हमें देखना है कि इस वक्त आरबीआई कोई स्टेप्स लेता है कि नहीं। ये रुपये का जो स्लाइड है उसका थोड़ा सा कुशनिंग करने के लिए, रोक तो नहीं सकते लेकिन थोड़ा सा कुशनिंग करके जहां पे अगर एक्सेस वो करे तो भी एक देखने का विषय रहेगा।
जी। अब बात करते हैं वैश्विक बाजारों की। एशियाई शेयर बाजार की बात करें तो आज यहां गिरावट रही। अमेरिका के केंद्रीय बैंक फेडरल रिजर्व द्वारा बढ़ती मुद्रास्फीति से निपटने के लिए कठोर मौद्रिक नीति अपनाने की संभावनाओं से निवेशकों में चिंता है। यूक्रेन संघर्ष में रूस पर पश्चिमी देशों के नए प्रतिबंधों पर भी निवेशकों का ध्यान लगा हुआ है। हांगकांग का हैंग सेंग आज 1.9% और जापान का निकेई 1.6% लुढ़क गए। दक्षिण कोरिया के कोस्पी में 0.9% और सिंगापुर के स्टेट्स टाइम्स सूचकांक में 0.7% की गिरावट दर्ज हुई। चीन का शंघाई कंपोजिट इंडेक्स अपने पूर्व स्तर के आसपास ही बंद हुआ। अंतर्देशीय कारोबार में यूरोपीय शेयर बाजारों में भी गिरावट थी। लंदन का FTSE 100 0.4%, फ्रांस का कैग 2.1% और जर्मनी का डैक्स 2% की गिरावट के साथ कारोबार कर रहे थे।
And moving on to the US markets, the three main US stock indices fell yesterday, dragged by weakness in tech and other growth stocks. After comments from the Federal Reserve Governor, Lael Brainard spooked investors about potential aggressive actions by the central bank to control inflation. The Dow Jones Industrial Average Index fell 0.8% and the S&P 500 declined 1.3% and the Nasdaq Composite plunged 2.3%. Jayanto, when we talk of the lockdown which is very much there in Shanghai and on also Hong Kong and other areas, how do you see this impacting the supply chain? Because supply bottlenecks would always be there. I am talking specifically of this point when we talk of the EV thing here. Mm-hmm. The electric vehicles which are very much on the anvil, as in semiconductors, of course, they're required for a variety of other products as well. But specifically, we are talking here of the EV sector, EV thing here. How do you see this?
Well, if you ask me, a very candid answer will be I'm not bothered about EVs at this point of time, specifically in terms of supply, because this is not what India or globally the world is banking on in terms of bringing a growth input, because it's a work in motion. And obviously, it's facing challenges, as you rightly pointed out, because of these closures. But what is certainly much more bothersome is, once again, Shanghai, which is the business capital of China, is under a complete severe lockdown with over 10,000 cases per day, which is really huge. The army has been brought in, around 2,000 people. 10,000 healthcare workers have been flown into Shanghai to contain the situation. Northeast of China is completely under lockdown. So, and the story goes that their vaccine has not been that effective compared to what, the Western world vaccines have been doing in terms of vaccines and how they have been. So, this is a serious cause of worry because, once again, last 2 years, if you see, whatever started in China has spread out over the globe in the next 4 to 5, 6 months. So, I don't see a situation whereby if this situation keeps on worsening in China, and let me tell you, the Shanghai government authorities have said this is the worst ever since COVID has started. So it's not something, we have seen. So if they say it's the worst ever, so maybe the number of deaths we don't know how many are happening or how fatal it is we still don't know. But if it is happening, the chances of it spreading across to the rest of Asia, including India, is not a very distant story. It can happen in the next 3 to 4 months. We in India are almost off masks and we are coming back to normalcy. So my main concern is whether this would once again be a factor going into the second quarter of this economy, for us. In Europe, UK has once again started seeing high number of cases. So now the question is, although the virus may be less virulent, may be less potent, but with the bounce back of cases in such a huge number, we need to see whether economies will once again come to a standstill. Coming back to initial question of EVs and effect of EVs, obviously any such move takes back the growth stories of the EV segment by at least 3 to 4 months. Because a lot of important material are coming from both China, Bolivia, and to some extent Taiwan. So these factors put in together, we have to see how the world shapes up in the market. In terms of domestic markets, I think Tata has been one of the largest EV manufacturers at this point of time. They're doing fairly well in terms of their supply side lineups.
और अब रुक करते हैं अगली खबर का। अंतर्राष्ट्रीय मुद्रा कोष ने भारत के खाद्य सब्सिडी कार्यक्रम की सराहना की है, जिसकी वजह से कोविड महामारी के दौरान देश में अत्यधिक गरीबी को बढ़ने से रोकने में मदद मिली। कोष ने एक रिपोर्ट में कहा है कि खाद्य हस्तांतरण और सब्सिडी का विस्तार गरीबी उन्मूलन के महत्वपूर्ण साधन रहे। रिपोर्ट में कहा गया है कि महामारी के दौरान 2020 में पात्रता को दोगुना करने से अत्यधिक गरीबी के स्तर को 0.8% के निचले स्तर पर बनाए रखने में मदद मिली। रिपोर्ट में कहा गया है कि बिना किसी खाद्य सब्सिडी के महामारी के दौरान अत्यधिक गरीबी में 1.05% की वृद्धि हो सकती थी। रिपोर्ट कहती है कि 2014 से 2019 की अवधि के दौरान देश में गरीबी में तेजी से कमी आई। जयंता, कोरोना महामारी के दौरान इस योजना ने, प्रधानमंत्री गरीब कल्याण अन्न योजना, एक संजीवनी का काम किया था। ये योजना क्या आप अपने आप में इसको कितना सफल मानते हैं?
देखिए, कोई भी योजना का सफलता का दो आंकड़े मूल तौर से होना चाहिए। जरूरी नहीं कि हमेशा आंकड़े में उन्नति हो। सबसे पहले जो जिस सेगमेंट के लिए योजना बनाया गया उस सेगमेंट को कितना हद तक उसमें इम्पैक्ट पहुंचा पाए जी। एक तो वो तो उसमें आंकड़े आपने बता दिए हमें कि काफी उसमें फर्क पड़ा, और दूसरा है कि योजना का सस्टेनेबिलिटी जो है कि कहां तक योजना का लागू होने में और साथ में सही, ऑब्वियसली सही टारगेट हो जाता है जब ठीक तरीके से लागू होता है। तो यहाँ पे भी आपने आंकड़े के दौर में हमें बताया कि किस तरह से उसको सफल, किस तरह से आंकड़े बता रहे। तो मैं मानता हूँ कि काफी हद तक सस्टेनेबल फूड का, सस्टेनेबल पॉवर्टी जो भी आप कहे साथ में, ये जो योजना है काफी हद तक ग्राउंड में इसमें इंटरेक्शंस हुए हैं। और 2-3 मेजर योजना इस केंद्र सरकार का, अगर पहले का तुरंत से हम कहे, आवास योजना जैसे कहे, उस तरह का एक फ्लैगशिप प्रोजेक्ट आके सामने आया हुआ है। तो मैं मानता हूँ आंकड़े के दौर से ही बताए जा रहे हैं, इसमें अलग से कोई टिप्पणी करने की जरूरत नहीं है, जहां पे फिगर्स आर स्पीकिंग फॉर
सफलता को देख करके इसको फिर बढ़ाया भी गया है।
बिल्कुल।
Right, and moving on to some other stories, exports of agricultural products, including marine, for the year 2021-22 have crossed the $50 billion mark, which is the highest level ever achieved in it. The Commerce and Industry Ministry in a statement today said that as per the provisional figures released by the Directorate General of Commercial Intelligence and Statistics, DGCIS, the agricultural exports have grown by 19.92% during 2021-22. This achievement over the past 2 years will go a long way in realizing Prime Minister's vision of improving farmers' income. The minister said the highest ever exports have been achieved for staples like rice, wheat, sugar, other cereals and meat, which resulted in benefiting farmers in many states. This achievement is the result of sustained efforts on the part of the Department of Commerce and its various export promotion agencies. It said even in the Russia-Ukraine war crisis, the world is looking at India for supplies of wheat and other food grains. The Department of Commerce is continuing efforts to promote agriculture export so that the momentum gained over the past 2 years is sustained and agriculture exports touch new highs over the coming years. And moving on to oil. Oil today rose, pairing early losses as the threat of new sanctions on Russia raised supply concerns, countering fears of weaker demand following a build in U.S. crude stockpiles in Shanghai's extended lockdown. The crude prices climbed around 1% in intraday trade. Brent crude was trading around $107.10 per barrel, but the WTI crude prices were at $103.60 per barrel.
और मल्टी कमोडिटी एक्सचेंज के जून के वायदा कारोबार में सोना आज 295 रुपए की तेजी के साथ 51,665 रुपए प्रति 10 ग्राम पर कारोबार कर रहा था। मई के वायदा कारोबार वाली चांदी 150 रुपए टूटकर 66,050 रुपए प्रति किलोग्राम के स्तर पर आ गई। वैश्विक बाजारों में न्यूयॉर्क मर्केंटाइल एक्सचेंज में सोना मंदी के साथ $1,925.60 प्रति औंस और चांदी $24.30 प्रति औंस के स्तर पर कारोबार कर रही थी।
So very quickly, Jayant, is it time to go back to the safe haven of gold?
Yeah, so I mean, see, if you tracked me down for the last 1.5 years, I've always said, even when the gold was one of the lowest in the recent times, I say it's a good commodity to go and invest in.
Yeah.
It's keeping up to his words, I guess.
Thank you so much, Janto, for enlightening our listeners. Thank you so much for joining in. And before we close, the headlines once again. Domestic stocks fall more than 0.8%. Sensex closes near 59,600 points. Nifty settles near 17,800. The rupee weakens 42 paise against the US dollar. Global stocks witness losses and Brent crude prices rise above $107 per barrel. This is Nishit Kumar along with me, my co-anchor Vishal Sharma, saying goodbye till we meet again the next time. Namaskar.